Welcome, everybody. We're so pleased to see you all here tonight. I'm Judy Lee, the president of the League of Women Voters of Lynchburg. Looks like a very strong audience tonight. And we're so pleased to have all these candidates. We're so disappointed that several people could not come due to prior commitments. And we just got the word within the last hour that Natalie Short was taken suddenly ill this afternoon and cannot be here. We're so disappointed. We would love to have a full house, of course. So we'll have a strong experience tonight anyway, because we're all committed. We want to thank Valeria Chambers, Clerk of City Council, for organizing all this here tonight. We really appreciate being able to use these chambers. We want to emphasize that the League does not support a particular political party, nor does it ever endorse any candidates. This is our mission statement. The League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Now, Dr. Joanna Harris, our moderator, will go over all the forum details. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would like to welcome you tonight to the 2017 Candidates Forum. Tonight we're going to hear from candidates running for Commonwealth Attorney, Commissioner of Revenue, Treasurer, and Sheriff. Unfortunately, the House of Delegates candidates could not join us tonight. I'm Joanna Harris. I'm a member of the Voter Service Committee and will be your moderator, as Judy said. I want to emphasize what she said, but because I think it's very important. The League does not support any particular party or candidate. We are strictly nonpartisan. This forum is not for League members. This forum is for the citizens of Lynchburg, or the public at large, any way you want to say it, and it gives the citizens of Lynchburg a chance to actually meet the candidates face to face and to be able to ask them questions about issues of their concern. And that's why we have this forum. I'm going to ask you if you would submit your questions in writing. We have cards and pencils available, and League women will pick up your questions if you'll just hold them up, and we will try to direct them to the appropriate candidate. So please, when you write your question, say who it's directed to, and we'll know who to ask. We'll try to get in as many questions in as we can in the time allotted. Because of the number of offices covered tonight, we had decided to divide the forum into three parts. Part one was going to be the House of Delegates candidates. That is not occurring tonight. Part two is the candidates for Commissioner of Revenue, Treasurer, and Sheriff, and you see them before you now, and so we will move them up. And part three will be the candidates for Commonwealth Attorney. So we will run from 7 to 8 instead of 7 to 8:30. And the format's going to be as follows. Each candidate will have the opportunity to give a 2-minute opening statement. We have our timekeepers right here. When you have 15 seconds left, they'll hold up the yellow card. When your time is up, they're going to wave a red card at you, and I'll be doing that. Then we'll have some questions for you that the League has formulated, and I think some of you have seen some of those from the Vote for 11. We'll ask those, and then we'll have additional questions from the audience. Your response will be limited to 1 minute for those. if anybody has a rebuttal or something they want to say about it, you can have 30 seconds for that. And again, they will be timing this. Audience questions will be also given 1 minute for a response. At the end, you will have a 2 minutes for a closing statement from each one of you. So you drew cards, numbers from a deck of cards, and I think, Mr. Bailey, were you the top? Oh, I got you backwards. Okay, I got you backwards. That shows where my memory is. Who was second then? Please.
I was second.
Okay.
Best for last.
I got them all wrong. Okay. Okay, Mr. Sloan, if you would start by telling us a little bit about yourself, why you're running for the office, what your qualifications are, and so forth.
Yes, ma'am.
2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Don Sloan, and I am the Sheriff of Lynchburg. It's my pleasure to be here tonight with you, and I ask for your vote November the 7th. I came to Lynchburg in January of 1978 to attend Liberty Baptist College, which is now Liberty University. In October of 1979, I began working for Liberty's Emergency Services, which later became Liberty University Police Department, and spent the next 22 years working my way up through the ranks to Chief of Police. My time at Liberty, I was able to obtain my bachelor's, my master's degree. I met my beautiful wife, Carla, of 33 years, and we have one 21-year-old son who is a junior at Liberty University. In January of 2002, I accepted the appointed position of Chief Deputy Sheriff for the City of Lynchburg Sheriff's Office under Sheriff Ron Gillespie. I spent the next 15 years as the Chief Deputy Sheriff, and on March 31st, 2017, I was appointed Sheriff of Lynchburg upon Sheriff Gillespie's early retirement, fulfilling the remainder of his term, and that's why I need your vote November the 7th. I'm honored to run for Lynchburg Sheriff because I'm qualified and trained for the position of Sheriff with my 37 years of service within the Lynchburg area. With 19 years of service in executive command leadership, I desire to be Sheriff of Lynchburg because I believe that our office can make a difference. And we make a difference in our community through engaging our schools and also through our community service with the Lynchburg Project Lifesaver Program. I also desire to be sheriff because Lynchburg and the Lynchburg area has been my home for the past 39 years. And I love Lynchburg, and I desire for Lynchburg to be the safest and most secure area that all of us can enjoy to live, work, and play. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Bailey.
My name's Robert Bailey. I'm the current treasurer for the city of Lynchburg. In May of last year, there was a special election where Dave Thurman had retired, and I filled out his seat, and that's why I'm running now to continue on. I'm from Lynchburg, grew up here, the whole thing, high school, went to Lynchburg College, got my bachelor's, master's degree. I've had an accounting practice here in town for 30 years. And those skill sets that I've learned over the years and with education, that's what sort of steered me to this position. And I feel that I want to accomplish several steps that I've set in motion already, that I've got things going in that office, and I don't want to stop yet. I want to keep moving forward. And if I can get reelected and ask for your vote on November 7th, I feel that I can continue the process. In May, when I was running, I may have said it at this forum before, that I was looking to add more responsibilities to the office and wanted to add more duties. We needed to make things more efficient in that office, I believe, because a lot of things were done manually. And again, visibility to the office was extremely important to myself because it was almost like the city had taken the treasurer's office and put us off to the side, and I wanted to change that a little bit to make us more available to the citizens of Lynchburg so they know where we are and what we're doing. I ask for your vote on November 7th, and thank you for having me here tonight.
Okay, Mr. Knuckles.
My name is Mitch Knuckles. I'm also born and raised here in Lynchburg. Attended Ferrum College for 2 years, graduated from James Madison with my accounting degree, served 4 years in the United States Army. Was very fortunate to be hired as the first business auditor in the Commissioner of Revenue Office, and that was in 1990. And then when my predecessor, Ms. Beamer, when she retired in 1991, I was fortunate enough to get the appointment and I have served since October of 1991 as your Commissioner of Revenue here in the city of Lynchburg. My mission statement, it's sort of short and sort of sweet, but what we strive to do in the Commissioner of Revenue's office is all state and local taxes that are assessed by myself or my staff, we try to ensure that's done in the most fair and equitable manner possible for all citizens in the city. Those of y'all that know me know I'm very, very passionate about what I do, and what I'd like to give you right now, if you want it, I'd like to just give you my email address. If you have questions, anything pertaining to the Commissioner of Revenue Office, the email address is very simple. It's COR at, and then it's lynchburgva.gov. COR at lynchburgva.gov. I look forward to answering the questions you have, and if you don't want to ask it in this public forum, please email me. I'll be glad to answer it, and I'm also very appreciative of the league having us here tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sloan, the league question, what are your biggest challenges as sheriff, and how do you tackle them?
Some of the challenges that the Lynchburg Sheriff's Office faces, along with other sheriff's offices in the Commonwealth of Virginia, is the budget constraints that we all deal with, which affect our sheriff's office in providing the highest level of public safety in our courts, service of civil process, and transportation of prisoners. Basically, we are doing more with less. We are required to provide courthouse security with no specific funding from the state for that function. We are required to provide transportation with no specific funding for that service. Also, our deputies continually have not consistently received pay raises throughout each year. And so that's something that we face as an office. We are dealing with those issues. We've dealt with them in the past. We have a relationship with the Virginia Sheriff's Association, and we have them put forward these things to our legislators. I also meet with our local and state legislators, keeping these issues on the front burner, and also working with other Virginia sheriffs so that we can work together to try to provide these benefits for our community.
Okay. I have another question here that kind of you led into with that. Describe the job of sheriff, which you did, but how is this job different from the police chief? I think a lot of people don't.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That's a great question. The Lynchburg Sheriff's Office primary responsibilities are threefold. We're responsible for courthouse and courtroom security. We're responsible for civil process of court papers, and we're responsible for the transportation of prisoners and mental commissions throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have 35 full-time and part-time people. We're not a large office, but we have those responsibilities. In 2016, we handled 39,500 civil process papers we served in the city of Lynchburg, and almost 600 transports throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia with prisoners and mental patients.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bailey, what are your biggest challenges, and how do you tackle them?
All right. The biggest challenges I've had since coming into office was trying to develop more duties for the office and find different things we could do. Part of that consisted of getting out of the basement, as I will say, from where the office was located to the first floor level here with the other financial services offices. In doing that, we took over DMV select collection activities, which allowed us to have more responsibilities, and we stay pretty busy doing that during the day now. The other challenges was in taking on that, you got to let the public know you're down here to offer the service. So now we're trying to communicate more with the people to let them know we're here, and that's a challenge. Another area of things, there was a lot of functions being done manually in the office, and I put in some software that would allow that to be automated so we could increase our time to provide better service to the citizens of Lynchburg in that aspect. That was the technology aspect of things we're looking at. And they're the biggest problems I have, is trying to find different things that we can do without costing the city more money. I like to take that on.
Okay. Mr. Knuckles, what's your biggest challenge, and how do you tackle it?
I mean, I have the same budgetary constraints that these gentlemen do, and that is a serious problem, funding from the Commonwealth. Now, if it wasn't for the city of Lynchburg kicks in about 75% of my total budget. So if it wasn't for the city, I mean, my office wouldn't be able to function. And when I have thought about this question a long time, what's my biggest challenge? And I don't mean to make light of it because we're all challenged by these things, but my biggest challenge, and I'm not trying to be funny, is return mail. If I could find a way to know where people are moving before they move or when they get there, I'd be a happy man. And these little devices right here have made addresses non-existent. People really don't need an address anymore because they do everything on that telephone. And that's my biggest challenge, seriously, is return mail.
Well, I have a question here for Mr. Bailey, but I think we ought to let both of you answer it. We describe the job of treasurer, which how is the job different from that of commissioner of revenue? I'd like both of you to respond to
I collect the tax, he assesses the tax. That's where we are. He tells you what you owe, and I say, let me have it. That's about it. Yeah, and he comes and gets it. So.
You want to add anything?
And that is exactly. I'm so glad Robert's here because most of the time when I go to meetings, they say, well, the city treasurer's here. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll take that hat too, I guess. But I am the assessor. I mean, by state code, the commissioner of revenue is a chief assessing official in a locality. So my office basically assesses the tax, and the one we all know and love is the car tax. I mean, that's one that touches everybody. And basically any tax assessed by the city of Lynchburg, with the exception of real estate tax, is primarily done in the commissioner's office. And again, the state functions on that part. Robert collects in the treasurer's office, and we also have a city collector that collects the local piece of the assessments.
Okay. Question for you, Mr. Knuckles. What is the size and composition of your staff?
Well, I have 10 employees, with 2 of those being a customer service rep just hired 2 months ago out front, and a business auditor who actually started yesterday. 10 members total, including myself. Chief deputy, I have 4 customer service reps on the front line basically, and then I have 3 operating in the business area, which handles the business license, the machinery and tools, business personal property, meals, lodging, and amusement, all those taxes which are assessed against businesses. So 10 members total.
Okay. Mr. Bailey, what about you? What's the size of?
It's myself and one other full-time chief deputy, and then I have a part-time customer service rep.
Okay. Mr. Sloan, how are you and the police chief coordinating your efforts to improve community relations?
That's a great question. The chief of police and I have a great working relationship. We've had, with the past chief of police, excellent working relationships. The former sheriff actually retired from Lynchburg Police Department after 27 years. We work very closely together. It's very important for us not to duplicate services because as taxpayers, each one of you pay for our services. So if we don't duplicate that through collaborative and cooperative efforts, that makes a difference for you on the bottom line. An example that I give for that is this. The Lynchburg Police Department is responsible for temporary detention order transports. However, the Lynchburg Sheriff's Office has offered to assist them with those transports with our Middle Commission transportation team when it comes off duty at 4:30. That team is able to transport these individuals. In 2016, we handled 132 transports, which allowed 264 police officers to remain in the city of Lynchburg policing our streets while we assisted them.
Okay. I have another same question for you here. What's the size and composition of your staff?
Yes, ma'am. We have a total of 19 full-time personnel with 15 part-time personnel that covers, again, we're covering 3 distinct courthouses, 6 distinct courtrooms, 3 lockups, and 4 entrances that all have to be manned by uniformed personnel. We also handle civil process throughout the city of Lynchburg, and we transport prisoners and mental commissions throughout the Commonwealth. We do that all with that 34 personnel total.
Okay, Mr. Knuckles, what are your priorities in your role?
As my role as Commissioner of Revenue,
Yes.
well, again, back to the mission statement. I mean, our number 1 goal is to ensure fairness and equity in the assessment of all local and state taxes. That's our number 1 goal. Number 2, what I always require or ask my staff to do is ensure the customer gets the right answer. Whatever that answer is, if you don't know the answer, Tell that customer, you take their number, you'll call them back, but ensure the customer gets the correct answer. And that's, you know, when you ask the question again about the biggest challenges, my biggest challenge is the next phone call. Every situation is different, and everyone's a priority. That's the way it is, and the way it always should be.
Okay. Mr. Sloan?
Yes.
What is your relationship with the Blue Ridge Regional Jail, and do you have any oversight over that?
The responsibility of the Blue Ridge Regional Jail is basically that the sheriffs, which is the Lynchburg Sheriff, Campbell County, Bedford County, and other county sheriffs, sit on the board of the regional jail. That is the only oversight that sheriffs have, just like the city manager is on the board as well with the Blue Ridge Regional Jail. So they do all the operation, they handle the jail, they have an administrator and other administrating staff that handles all the regional jail system. So the sheriff's office no longer has any control whatsoever over the jail other than being one member that sits on the board.
You have said that you want to create community partnerships. What type of partnerships are you currently creating or currently have in mind?
Well, one of the specific partnerships that we've just created is with our elementary schools, a program that we've had relationships with our elementary schools in the past. But one of the things that I've done is started a program we called First Step. I met with 9 of our elementary school principals, and our elementary schools do not have a school resource officer on site. They have officers that will report there if they have a situation. Our men and women at the sheriff's office serve civil process throughout our community. Our city is broken up in sections. Those areas that they serve in that section, there are schools, elementary schools in those sections. So we have deputies that stop in every day of the week visiting that school. They stop in and talk to the administration. They have a visible marked unit out front providing visible security. They're in uniform. They go in, they engage the children. Sometimes they have lunch with the children. Sometimes if they have time, they read to the children. But it gives us an opportunity to build relationships and hopefully affect their attitude towards law enforcement in a positive manner so that we can possibly raise up a generation that would be interested in going into law enforcement as well and also making the right decisions.
You're getting the questions tonight.
I told you I didn't want to go first.
What changes to policing, sentencing, and incarceration do you support or oppose?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
What changes to policing, I think this is, sentencing and incarceration do you support or oppose?
And sentencing, well, that's a responsibility of the judge to bring about a sentence. Our responsibility is basically to either contain the individuals in the process of court, or if we make an arrest, take them before a magistrate where they go through the process itself. So, but as far as the sentencing phase, that's something that the judge does.
And incarceration, are you?
Incarceration?
Yeah.
Well, if somebody commits a crime, we basically, if it's in our presence or our people are out serving process and something occurs and they take them into custody, then they're going to take them into the system as far as the Blue Ridge system until they have their day in court.
Mm-hmm. Do you support or oppose any changes there? I think.
Any changes? Well, I guess I'd have to know specifically what changes they're talking about, so that's pretty broad.
I'm sorry, I can't.
No problem.
Clarify
No
that
problem.
any. Okay, I guess this is Mr. Bailey. How do you ensure that all taxes are assessed in a fair and equitable manner?
Well,
That would be you.
that's going to be
you.
me. I mean,
Okay.
with vehicles, it's a fairly simple process. We assess utilizing the National Automobile Dealers Association used car guide, and we assess at 100% of clean trade, but we do offer the high mileage reduction, which is offered to all citizens. So that's that mechanism. Now, when you're looking at gross receipts, it's pretty much the same. You're looking at gross receipts, which happens to be line 1 on an income tax return. That's why most folks despise the gross receipts tax, because you don't get to take any deductions from that. But I mean, my staff is continually looking at all those tax returns, all those forms, comparing them to what we have on our file to ensure we have fairness and equity across all businesses and individuals in the city of Lynchburg.
Okay. This one's for Mr. Bailey. What have you learned from being city treasurer, and what changes have you made as a result?
Well, what I've learned is that you can always do a better job every day if you just try a little bit. And with the various duties and responsibilities we've added, the staff has been supportive and has moved forward, and everything is progressing in a fashion that I like. And I think if we continue the process over the next 4 years, there'll be some bigger changes that I can present, hopefully, that citizens will benefit from and enjoy coming to us rather than the way they do now. You know, by the time they get to me at the end of the line, I usually get agitated individuals, and I try to calm them down and get them smooth it over so that, you know, paying the taxes is what we have to do. None of us like it, but you have to live with it.
And I don't really want to do a rebuttal, but can I just add a little bit?
Sure.
With Robert, I mean, within 2 months of becoming treasurer, he took the treasurer's office from the basement up on the first floor right beside the city collector's office and right across the hall from my office. Now, that might sound small, but that was huge.
I'm sure.
I mean, when folks come to my office and I have to send them to the treasurer, it's a whole lot more than saying just go downstairs, that's where it's at. I mean, it's twists and turns, and I mean, that was fantastic. And then Robert, he's also taken over the collections aspect of the DMV service. Again, I've started that process, but it ends in Robert's office. And I mean, it is such a smoother process now than it was before Robert took it over, so kudos to him on that.
Okay. Mr. Sloan, what type of training do you and your deputies receive?
All members of the Lynchburg Sheriff's Office go through the local police academy. In order to be a deputy sheriff, there's 2 tracks. You're either law enforcement certified or jail certified, and then there's an additional training of courthouse and courtroom security on top of that initial certification. Every year there's in-service training that all the deputies must go through. They must qualify with their firearms and all of their other types of secondary defense weapons every year. And so this training is ongoing through our local police academy, which is also training our police officers as well.
What new gun safety measures do you advocate? What are your thoughts about the use of silencers on guns? And what about open carry? Well,
Virginia is an open carry state already, so it's available already, but there are certain areas that citizens cannot carry on school property, federal buildings, things of that nature. As far as gun safety issues, I think if you're going to have a firearm in your home, then you need to know how to use it, and whoever has access to it. Secondly, that firearm needs to be secured. There's safes that are available out there for $150 to $300 that make the security of those firearms where they need to be, because again, leaving an unattended firearm available for a child or an adult or untrained person is a recipe for disaster. So again, if you own a firearm, you need to have training for it, and then you need to make sure it's properly secured because you are responsible for that firearm.
Okay. Did you address silencers on guns? Really, you've got 3 questions in one here, so we'll give you a little more time, I think.
Yeah, okay, well, I just didn't want to go over my time.
And open carry.
Well, open carry, again, I don't have an issue with open carry because it is the law of Virginia that you can open carry. So as long as you're carrying in those areas that you're legally allowed, I don't have an issue for that. I don't have a problem with it. As far as silencers are concerned, again, I know that the rationale between, again, they're not a silencer because a true silencer muffles all sound. They're a suppressor. They actually suppress the sound. So there is a difference. But the suppression of a firearm sound does help those individuals that if you have a noise ordinance or someone's shooting at a range, it can reduce that. So I think there's places for that, so that, you know, depending on where the range is located and the amount of people that are near that area, that may be an option to consider if they need to utilize that facility for training for law enforcement or someone else, that could be made available. So I think in special circumstances, of course, law enforcement, we have access to those, but we're talking about civilians. And so without a Class 3 permit for you to have one as a silencer, which you have to pay for that, then you couldn't as a citizen.
All right. Okay, I'd like to close this part of the program with a question for all three of you to respond to. And I guess, let's see, we'll start with Mr. Bailey this time. Okay. Describe your most meaningful volunteer experience and how it has impacted you. And I ask all three of you to respond to that. You can start.
Well, the biggest volunteer experience I've had in my life was volunteering my time with Lynchburg Little League. And I've done that for over how many years? It's been close to 20 years of being involved and working with the young men and ladies that have participated in those sports. I coached for several years, and I still do tax returns for the organization after all these years, and that's made me feel really good about seeing kids. And obviously, not obviously, but one night I was watching the Baltimore Orioles play, and I saw a gentleman come up that I'd coached here in town. I thought, oh, well, maybe he learned something from me. You know, it's like makes you feel good. You know, but that's the biggest thing for me.
Okay, Mr. Knuckles.
Well, I hate to say that Robert stole my thunder, but I mean, I sport a Little League pin. So I've coached baseball for softball for my two daughters, baseball for my son, that happens to be the youngest, for over 20 years. And I mean, if anybody's been to my office, you know, I have the kids' pictures and banners. I've got it all over the place in my office, and that is truly what I love. I love volunteering my time for the girls and the boys, and I hate to use the same one Robert used, but I've now served for the last 7 years as a treasurer for Lynchburg Little League, filling his shoes that he sort of served 15 years ago. But anyway, I've also served on the Ferrum College alumni board, and when you do food drives and things of that nature, I've enjoyed taking part in that. But my true, what I love the most and just have enjoyed the most is my baseball and softball experiences.
Son?
Well, I had the opportunity to travel overseas to a foreign country with another pastor to assist with a missions trip. And I think one of the most significant things that I saw was the fact of how blessed we are here in the United States. But to minister to these children in that setting and try to encourage them and to meet some of their needs, even for a temporary time, was very significant. And it really made me realize how important it is that we engage our own families here and those around us to try to make a difference.
Okay. Well, I thank all three of you. Appreciate you participating tonight. And we'll have a quick break here while you all can join the rest of us, and we'll have the Commonwealth Attorney's candidates come forward. If I could have your attention, I think we're ready to get started with the second part of our program tonight. I'd like to welcome our Commonwealth Attorneys candidates, Bethany Harrison and Carlos Hutchison. Again, I will remind you, each will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then you'll have questions, some from the league, and we have gotten a lot of questions from the audience. And so we'll start with the ones from the league and then go to the ones from the audience. You'll have 1 minute response time for the questions. If you have a rebuttal to what your opponent has said, you'll have 30 seconds for that. And then we will have a 2 minute closing statement. Mr. Hutchison drew the high card, so he will go first, and then Ms. Harrison will give the first closing statement.
Good evening. I'd like to thank the league for having us here this evening. My name is Carlos Hutchison. I'm running for Commonwealth Attorney here in Lynchburg. Married to Gloria Hutchison, and I have 2 sons, Carlos Jr. and Khalif, who are here with us. My family's been a part of this community for over a century, and over the years, I've personally worked to make Lynchburg a better city. I grew up attending city schools, T.C. Miller, Robert S. Payne at the Go Center, Lincoln, E.C. Glass, where I was a part of the 1988 state football team. I went to undergraduate at Virginia Union University. I obtained a dual degree in history and political science, and I obtained my law degree from Liberty University School of Law. Serve on several nonprofit organizations here in the city as a board member. I've worked in the city as a paper boy, as a grass cutter, fast food, owned a store, legal assistant, and now I'm an attorney in private practice. As an attorney, I've argued cases, of course, in J&D District and Circuit Court. I've argued before the Virginia Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court of Virginia, administrative boards, workers' comp, and so forth. As a son of the city, I'm invested in seeing that this community demonstrates that it's one of the best places to live in America. Growing up in Lynchburg gives me an intimate understanding of our community. We are a faith-based community, a spiritual community. We believe in restoration and redemption and grace. We believe in second chances. This is a compassionate community. I know that from growing up in this community. I understand this office requires that the office holder be firm with offenders. I promise to do that. I also promise to be a role model for young citizens here in Lynchburg. I believe that our community would benefit from more diversionary programs, not just incarceration. I believe diversion programs do two things. They both strengthen our community and they save everyone economically. It saves money for us. My time is up and I will yield. Thank you.
Ms. Harrison.
Good evening. I'm Bethany Harrison. I am your Chief Deputy Commonwealth's Attorney for the City of Lynchburg. It's been my privilege to serve this community for the past 10 years as a prosecutor. I'm from Virginia. I'm from Chesterfield County. I went to UVA for undergrad, then the University of Alabama for law school. My husband, Eric, who is here in the audience, and I are raising our two boys here. They're Austin, who is 6 years old, and James is 3 years old, and we are members of Rivermont Evangelical Presbyterian Church. We need a Commonwealth's attorney who is an experienced leader in the office, in the courtroom, and the community. I am the only candidate who meets those criteria. I'm a leader in the courtroom. I've prosecuted over 2,400 cases, everything from murder, robbery, carjacking, down to DUI. I'm a leader in the office. I supervise 10 other attorneys and 19 support staff. They turn to me with their questions about how to proceed with cases and trust the advice I have to give because of my experience. And I'm a leader in the community. I'm the board president for CASA. I'm the chairwoman for the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And I serve on the board of the YWCA. And we have serious issues that face our city. And while it's our primary job to work to hold offenders accountable for the crimes they commit, we also work to tackle some of the issues that we see. Our priorities are crime prevention, to do our part to curb the cycle of addiction and stop the cycle of domestic violence. And these serious issues need someone with experience and experience in leadership in order to tackle these. I'm ready to lead on day one, and I ask for your vote on November 7th.
Okay, thank you. Question for each of you, and I guess we'll let Mr. Hutchison go first again. What are the biggest challenges for the Commonwealth's attorney, and if elected to this position, how will you tackle them?
I think there are many challenges. There's, in my opinion, always things that could be done better. One of the challenges that I see in this community and that I hear from citizens in this community is the idea that the Commonwealth Attorney's Office is not part of the community, that it is separate from the community, that it does not, that it works in some aspects, it doesn't represent the community. I believe that the diversity in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office would help address some of those things. Clients that I have that go to court don't see anyone that looks like them. Clients that I have that go to court feel as if, and I like to be clear, as a defense attorney, My clients are presumed to be innocent. When we go to court, my clients have a idea that the Commonwealth Attorney is completely against them, as if they don't stand a fair chance. That fairness and that perception of fairness, in my opinion, is what is lacking in the Commonwealth Attorney's office and what needs to be, I guess, one of the biggest challenges and something that I can help address, that perception.
Okay. Ms. Harrison, what are the biggest challenges for the Commonwealth Attorney? And if elected, how would you tackle them?
The three priorities for our administration I just listed, crime prevention, curbing the cycle of addiction, and stopping the cycle of domestic violence, are some of the biggest issues that we face and that our society faces. When it comes to curbing the cycle of addiction, we have started a new initiative called Drug Court. It is a diversion program for people who are on supervised probation, and it's an intensive program to work towards sobriety for people who otherwise would just go through the system, test positive for drugs, serve their jail sentence, get back out, do it again. And we want to help them achieve sobriety because we want them to get out of that same cycle of behavior that has led them to a life of crime. In order to stop the cycle of domestic violence, we use research and evidence-based approaches on how to address the needs of our victims, that we intervene in cases immediately after the physical abuse has happened, because research shows that when these victims know there are resources out there for them, they have a safe place to go, they're much more likely to leave their abuser and hold their offender accountable. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Harrison, if you would start with the next question. Considering the high cost of imprisoning offenders, recurrent recidivism rates, and restorative justice principles, what are the best options for dealing with lower-level crime?
And this question really highlights why experience is so important in your Commonwealth's attorney. Because over 10 years, I've learned that balance between where it is appropriate to seek jail time and where it's appropriate to seek mercy and alternative methods of punishment. And we use what's best for society, what's best for our victims, and for our city. For example, in driving suspended cases, someone can have a suspended license simply because they didn't pay their court fines and costs. Well, how are they going to pay those court fines and costs? By driving to work. And we want them to be able to do that. But if they're doing it and it's still illegal, still against the law, they're charged with driving suspended, they can face up to 12 months in jail. Very unlikely to get that. But we want them to work towards getting that license. So what we do is if they come to court, they accept responsibility that what they did was wrong, and they make substantial progress towards getting their license, just get on a payment plan. They come back to court, and we'll find them guilty of a lower offense, having no license, and just give them a fine. So there's accountability there, but also steps towards addressing the underlying problem.
Okay. Mr. Hutchison, same question.
The best options with dealing with lower-level crimes?
Crime, yes.
Yes, ma'am. Diversionary programs, they do permit the offender to become responsible for their actions and to understand the negative impact it has on the community. Mike Doucette did set up the program about the driving suspended, if you're suspended for fines. That was primarily based on some case law that came out, and he was proactive in addressing that. I think that's a good thing. I also believe that when you have offenders, or for example, a 19, 20-year-old kid with a petty larceny, never been in trouble before, that kid needs to have the opportunity to not have that petty larceny on his record forever. In Virginia, convictions can't be expunged. And so that conviction would ride with him for the rest of his life. I'm of the opinion that that young person should be permitted the opportunity to do some community service, pay some restitution, pay a fine, and not be stuck with that conviction that's going to stay with them forever.
All right. How would you ensure equal justice in our diverse environment? Ms. Hutchison, why don't you start this one?
How would I ensure?
Ensure equal justice in our diverse environment.
And that's an interesting question because we have a diverse city. This city is very diverse. And I believe that the system is just. However, the perception of justice evades our criminal justice system here. The perception that the community has about the criminal justice system here in Lynchburg, and the perception that the the system has on or of our community. If you're in the courts here, you'll see 70 to 80% minorities in the courts as defendants or as offenders. You will see no minorities on the bench. You will see no minorities in the public defender's office. If you are in circuit court and you are indicted, you will not have a minority appointed to represent you in court. I think those things destroy any perception of fairness for a minority who comes to court. You're supposed to have faith and trust that this is where I go to seek justice. And that perception, I believe that perception is essential to a working and beneficial community.
Okay, Ms. Harrison, how would you ensure equal justice in our diverse environment?
Over the course of my career, I have been the voice for victims of crime that came from various different cultures, nationalities, sexual orientation, races, religions, and political backgrounds. And for each defendant, we are sensitive to those issues, and each case is taken on a case-by-case basis. We do not, while we might have an overall policy or procedure in how we proceed with cases, each case is taken as an individual case, not just a number on a file. We take into consideration the facts and circumstances we have in each of those cases, the background of our defendant, what the victim's needs are, and fashion our method of how we're going to go forward. And ways that I've been able to understand and reach my victims where they are is through cultural competency. I've been to national trainings, statewide trainings, and locally, which helps you understand the issues that face certain members of the community. We are all informed in our life decisions by our particular backgrounds and where we're from. And while I may not be from another person's particular background, I seek to understand and meet that person where he or she is to understand what is valuable to them and what they want to seek out of our justice system.
Okay, thank you. Now we have questions from the audience. I think this is addressed to both of you. What is the biggest change you plan on making if elected? Would you like to start then? Yeah.
Sure. As far as the biggest change I would like to make is really honing on the skills in our office and working on that mentorship with our attorneys to make sure that we are effectively doing our job, not just working harder, but working smarter, to implement regular trainings in our office from the attorneys to come in and just present a topic each month. We have statewide trainings that teach us different things about updates in the law, but I think it's important to do that within our own office and make sure that we are effectively doing our job.
Mr. Hutchison, what change would you plan on making if you're elected?
One, I would like to revamp the discovery process that we have here in Lynchburg. Lynchburg, we have what's called they have an open file policy. They allow us to look at the file, whatever's in the file. Sometimes the issue comes up when we get to look at the file. I think there is some unnecessary, in my opinion, gamemanship at times with getting the evidence that is there or against my client or against the defendant, the accused. I also believe that we need to revamp the review of cases. I know when a couple deputy Commonwealth attorneys who are no longer there used to review the files, like Mike Doucette reviews files, and that allows them to determine, which is a duty of the Commonwealth attorney, which cases we go forward with. I believe that the Commonwealth Attorney's Office now goes forward with far too many cases when there's insufficient evidence to go against, to try a case. And I think that's shown with the number of cases that you're getting not guilties or you're getting guilties of way reduced charges. Those are some of the things I think that I would address or that I know I would address as Commonwealth Attorney.
Okay. Next question, Ms. Hutchison, will come to you. In your view and experience, how important is the Commonwealth Attorney's relationship with law enforcement, and how prepared are you to handle this?
I think it's very important. I am very prepared to work with law enforcement on every level to work these cases up. The law enforcement is, they're two separate jobs, and I think that's something that we have to be clear. The prosecutors prosecute the cases. Law enforcement essentially gathers the evidence, makes the arrest. Prosecution, once the charges are filed, we prosecute the case. As a Commonwealth Attorney, we have the option to say that we don't have enough here to prosecute the case. We have the option to amend what the charge is. We have a lot of options, and that's our duty. That's what we're there for. I am, I know a lot of law enforcement. There are great guys in law enforcement. I think the new chief is doing a great job. I think he's doing a great job in providing more diversity in the department. I am prepared to work with everyone in law enforcement as Commonwealth Attorney in Lynchburg.
Okay, Ms. Harrison, in your view and experience, how important is the Commonwealth Attorney relationship with law enforcement, and how prepared are you to handle this?
Well, that relationship it's critically important to have a relationship with law enforcement. They're the ones who are investigating the cases, the first responders on the scene. They are in constant contact with us, and we're regularly discussing cases and charges, how to go about investigations. I know right now, as the Chief Deputy Commonwealth Attorney, police officers call me all hours of the day and night, and sometimes in the middle of the night, and ask questions about what to do. And you have to be prepared to answer those questions and have that working relationship with law enforcement so that from the very beginning of the case that things are done properly. If you aren't doing them properly from the beginning, by the time you get to court, evidence that may be critical to the case can be thrown out. Someone who should be found guilty will go free. It's vitally important that someone who is the Commonwealth Attorney have that experience and have that relationship with law enforcement.
May I respond?
Sure.
One of the things, and this came up before, one of the issues I have with the current relationship that they have is as I understand it, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office has indicated to law enforcement that, for example, if certain persons give you a call, you have probable cause to act on their information. And that's concerning to me. As a defense attorney, as an attorney, as a legal scholar, the Commonwealth Attorney, you can't slight cases. If there's not probable cause there, you can't say, well, we'll give you probable cause and we'll back you on it. And this issue won't come up because we will do something else. We will dispose of this case some other way. We'll either plead this case out before the issue of lack of probable cause comes up, or we will reduce the charge or drop the charge. I think that is concerning. As citizens, we would want to know that. We would be shocked to understand that this is going on in our city. Those are some of the things that are that need to come to light, that need to be changed, and that I think are blatantly unfair to the citizens of Lynchburg.
We have 30 seconds for rebuttal, remember.
I apologize.
May I respond to that rebuttal? As a Commonwealth Attorney and a prosecutor, you are constantly evaluating cases as they come through the office. And there are a number of times that we get rid of charges because the case changes and you no longer have probable cause. That's our ethical threshold in order to put forth a case. And we take that very seriously. Even if it means you have to null process the case on the day of trial. That's what we do because we are ministers of justice. We're here to do what's right for the city and do what's right by the law.
Next question. What training have you received that qualifies you to prosecute the most serious of crimes and to provide support to other prosecutors in the office? I've lost track of who goes next. Okay, Ms. Harrison, why don't you?
Well, I've been a prosecutor for 10 years now. I started off in the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court, prosecuting some of the hardest cases that you go to court, which are domestic violence cases, where frequently your own victim of the crime, the person who called the police, will come in and change your story or not want to proceed. And so thinking outside the box and finding ways to hold the offender accountable or put services in place for your victim was critically important to my training in leading up to the bigger cases, such as murder. I prosecuted a homicide of a 2-year-old child, where it was based on circumstantial evidence. There's no confession, there's no eyewitness, but instead I had to work with medical professionals and build a case and succeeded to victory and achieved justice for that family. I've been to national trainings, local trainings. We have regular trainings through the Commonwealth Attorney Services Council that are constantly preparing us and honing our skills for how to proceed effectively with cases.
Okay, Mr. Hutchison, what training have you received that qualifies you to prosecute the most serious of crimes and to provide support to other prosecutors in the office?
Well, we are all attorneys. I have defended all levels of cases, up to murder, to rape. The thing about, and it was something that was mentioned before, how can a defense attorney be a prosecutor? And when you ask that question, you really slight defense attorneys. Because then you'd say, well, how can a prosecutor ever be a defense attorney? We have some great defense attorneys who are former prosecutors. Mr. Sanzone, Jamie Angel, there are several in the city. The law and justice should not be one-sided. So when you learn the law, when you argue the law, it's separate arguments or perspectives on the evidence. But to your question is what training I've had, that is the training I've had. I've won several jury trials. I have, and I dare say that the trials that I win, my clients are innocent, and that's why we win those trials. Had my clients been guilty, we would, I apologize. And I just need to ask, if I do get the red card, do I get to finish or should I stop?
That's the indication that your time is up. Okay. But I want you to finish your sentence and your thought. Okay. We're not going to stop you in mid-sentence. Yeah.
Right. I forgot where I was at.
Okay. This is, again, to address to both of you. And Mr. Hutchison, you'll go first this time. I know from personal experience as an independent tradesman contractor that vocational education is the one and only preventive solution to crime and excess incarceration. Is there currently a well-organized, well-manned, and well-funded entity, public or private, that serves as a vocational training program that helps prepare men for life after prison? Mr. Hutchison, if you... It's a long question. Yeah. Would you like for me to read it again?
Just the last part, probably.
Is there currently a well-organized, well-manned, and well-funded entity, either public or private, that serves as a vocational training program that helps prepare men for life after prison?
No.
Okay, Ms. Harrison?
There are multiple different organizations in the Commonwealth, and in Lynchburg in particular, that work with reentry for offenders and specifically for obtaining jobs. Now, as far as what specifically is out there for offenders for reentry for vocational training, I'm not certain, but I know there is a Blue Ridge Reentry Council where it is a collaborative effort of people from multiple different organizations coming together to help offenders reenter and readjust to society. And the one thing we would like to see is for offenders to never come back to our court again. And I call them offenders because they're there because they've committed a crime and they've served their time, and for them to move on to rehabilitation would be wonderful. That we would love to see that in every case.
And if I may respond, there are several groups, LENCAG, Amazing Grace, groups that work with returning citizens, which is what we call them. So there are groups and there are organizations, and those are just two. There are others, but I don't believe any of them are well-manned or well-funded, and that's to clarify my answer. I think we could do more to help these returning citizens because they're returning, they need the help, and we need them to stay out here, to stay citizens and stay returned. Thank you.
This is to both of you also. Do you believe it is appropriate for alleged drug dealers to be charged with murder if a person they sell to dies from an overdose in instances where they did not administer the drug to the deceased? Do you believe it's appropriate for alleged drug dealers to be charged with murder if a person they sell to dies from an overdose? Ms. Harrison?
Yes, there in the law allows for us to charge for felony murder for someone who is committing a felony, and even though they did not intend for someone to be killed, if out of the course of that felony someone dies. And if someone is distributing illegal drugs into our city and to our community members, and someone dies from that, I think the person who is dealing them the poison should be held accountable. The case I mentioned earlier about the young child who was murdered, that was a felony murder case. That gives you an example of how that is used in other cases. It was a case of child abuse where we could not prove that he was intending to murder the child, but out of the course of that child abuse, the child died. And so this is an important statute, an important way that we can hold people accountable so they're not just getting these low sentences, even though because they've distributed drugs, they've caused the death of another person. And there are limitations on that. But here it is foreseeable that if you are distributing illegal drugs in this day and age with fentanyl and carfentanil and things being put into heroin and are just instantly deadly, that we take this very seriously.
Ms. Touchson?
And could you get, do I believe that?
Do you believe it's appropriate for alleged drug dealers to be charged with murder if a person they sell to dies from the overdose?
I do not. Unless that person, the alleged drug dealer, injected them with the drugs, I believe that changes it. I believe if an adult purchased something legal or illegal and dies from it, I think that's a sad situation, but I don't think we then go and blame where they got it from. Fentanyl is something that's, it's all these things, and there was an article that just came out talking about how big pharmaceutical and the opioid epidemic, and so do we start to charge them? Do we start to charge the doctors that write the prescriptions? Do we start to, where does the causation line end there? I believe if a person injects someone, I think that's something different. I believe if someone purchases something from someone, that's a distribution and that's a crime in and of itself, and that crime can be prosecuted. But I don't believe that that is a murder where there's no intent there.
Next question. What role, if any, do you see for the Commonwealth Attorney in ensuring that student behavior issues do not feed students into the school to the prison, to school to prison pipeline, from school to prison pipeline? What role do you see for the Commonwealth Attorney in ensuring that student behavior issues do not feed students into the school to prison pipeline? Mr. Hutchison.
Well, that's a great question. I believe one of the things, that pipeline, and I was talking about the perception of the criminal justice system towards our citizens. What I see in J&D court when I'm representing a juvenile who's charged with a crime, he's treated as a criminal. He's treated as, I don't care if he's 11, 12, and he broke into a car. He's a criminal as opposed to a delinquent or a bad child or a child, which is what they are. And I believe once you start, even at that tender age, identifying a kid as a criminal as opposed to a child that's acting up or even a delinquent, which I don't like that word either. But once you set that dynamic in place, it lasts and it continues. And that adversarial perception from that child, from that 11-year-old, that 12-year-old with the legal justice system remains. And he doesn't believe that the system, or won't believe that the system is there for him, but that the system is there against them from a youth.
Okay. Ms. Harrison?
Well, having had years of experience in prosecuting in the juvenile and domestic relations court, I know that the purpose of that court, whether a child has committed a crime in school or outside of school, the purpose of that court is rehabilitation. Safety of the community is a factor to be considered, but even if they're what we would normally call found guilty, they don't call it that in the juvenile court. They call it adjudicated delinquent, because we recognize that children don't think ahead, that their brains aren't fully formed, that they need that help, they need rehabilitation, and we form and fashion dispositions in those cases that are appropriate. Most any child who comes through the juvenile domestic relations court is given an opportunity to not have a criminal record, and that's either through taking the charge under advisement, where it's held over their head for a period of time, and if they go through counseling or community service, it's dismissed. If it's a very violent, serious offense, well, that's treated differently depending on the facts and circumstances of those cases. But it's important for the Commonwealth Attorney to work with schools to create protocols for how to deal with things that are just disciplinary and behavioral issues versus what are criminal matters.
May I
Certainly.
respond to that? And what I see in the court, I know we all went to high school, a high school fight or a middle school fight. You get suspension or you get in-school suspension. What these kids get now is they get criminal charges. They get charged with assault. Those that aren't even involved in the physical altercation, a lot of times are getting charged with obstruction of justice. And those are criminal charges. And those aren't something to be taken light. So if you're a child and you're at school and you're upset and you're yelling, you can get a criminal charge as opposed to a suspension or something else. And I think there is a better way to deal with those types of situations. It's not all, criminalization can be too much, especially dealing with our kids.
Okay. Now, I have a couple questions here who are addressed just to Mr. Hutchison. Your website calls for revamping the office's domestic violence protocols. What are the current office protocols and what changes would you make?
Well, what I would do different in the domestic violence arena is I believe that, and Ms. Harrison, I agree with her. A lot of times you come to court and the alleged victim says it didn't happen. Says, no, we were both drunk and, you know, I fell, he didn't hit me, or he says he fell, she didn't hit him. And what do you do in those situations? We weren't there. We can guess as to what happened, but we know this person is coming here now, said something that one day, and now they're coming to court under oath and they're saying something else, or they're telling us that that's what they're going to say under oath, that it didn't happen. So what do you do? For the offender, he has the opportunity, if it's a first offense, to have it taken under advisement. He takes anger management, and he can take counseling, and he can have it dismissed. But that does nothing with the other party. What I would like to see is I would like to see in those situations some joint counseling. If you want to change your story and if you want to have this taken under advisement, how about some joint counseling that you both must participate in? And that's a condition of the disposition, that they both have to participate in the program.
May I respond?
Yes.
As well to that. Over the past year, we've started a number of new initiatives when it comes to domestic violence protocols, and we've had protocols in place since I started in 2006. One of those is the lethality assessment protocol, and I mentioned before about intervening with victims as soon as the violence occurs. That's when they're in the actionable phase, when they're willing to do something about it. And with that lethality assessment protocol, it's a screen to assess the risk of homicide. That's what we're trying to prevent in these cases. And the officers investigate the crime, take the victim aside, and ask a series of questions that are evidence-based for being high risk for homicide. And based on that, they then call the YWCA for a hotline advocate to speak to that victim and let her know her options in that case. So it has nothing to do with the criminal process, but it is a way to help shore up our victims of domestic violence. And another new initiative we have is our domestic abuse response team, where we are constantly evaluating our protocols and making sure there are no gaps or barriers to services for our victims.
And if I may respond to
Okay.
that. And what I see in court is the exact opposite. If that victim comes in at times and has a different story, that victim is threatened with criminal charges themselves. They're threatened with a show cause or a capias if they don't show up. They're threatened with a perjury charge because the Commonwealth, who no one was there but two individuals, the Commonwealth says, well, we believe we know what happened, and so if you say something different, we're going to charge you with perjury, and whether we can prove it or not, we're going to charge you, and that's what's been, it's happened several times that I know of here in Lynchburg.
If I can respond. I'm going to go back and forth forever. Well, that should not be happening. If that is happening, I'd ask that you bring that to our attention so we can address that. Matter of fact, we make it, we purposely do not charge victims with filing a false report, even if they come in and say, what I said was a lie to the officer, because we don't want that chilling effect on our victims. We tell them, look, this isn't about burying the offender under the jail. We can give him help, we can get him services, but you have to tell the truth about what happened. And even if they're still sticking to, okay, it didn't really happen, we let them know, look, we're always here for you. And if you want to go forward next time, please call the police. We want to make sure you're safe. That's what this is about, to make sure that you're safe. You don't deserve to be treated this way, and we want to do what's right by you and your family.
And if I may respond to that, and this is my last response, I promise you. Another thing that I've seen, and I was completely amazed at it, some of those situations you'll have each individual take a charge out on the other, cross warrants. Two people there, they both say something else happened, they both take out warrants against each other. It happens. What this Commonwealth Attorney's Office has done is they would pick a side, say we believe this party or we believe that party, and we're going to dismiss the other party's warrant, which I am amazed at how you could have the global knowledge to say that although we weren't there and although we believe one thing or the other, we're going to dismiss this person's right to take a warrant out, a cross warrant, and we're going to dismiss their case. And I think that's just completely unfair, heavy-handed, and shouldn't be done.
All right, next question. This is addressed to you again, Mr. Hutchinson. Your social media activities reflect a very critical, if not negative, view of law enforcement. How do you characterize your interactions with law enforcement officials, and how do you plan to gain their trust as a prosecutor if elected?
I think that's a slanted question. First of all, I'm not sure what social media activity that's anti-law enforcement coming from me. That is completely a misnomer, and perhaps that's a mistake in the question. And I don't know how to respond to something that's not there. But how would I work with law enforcement was the second part, I believe? Yes. Or how would I get...
How do you characterize your interactions with law enforcement officials, and how do you gain their trust?
Well, we have good interactions. Law enforcement officers is what I'll call them. I presume that's who we're speaking of. I have many interactions. A lot of time in court, it's a question as a witness, and these officers are, you know, honest guys, which is what you want. You want straight testimony. I don't want you to add. I don't want you to attempt to be the prosecutor in the case. I want you to testify as to what happened. And that's what the officers here do much of the time. How do I get law enforcement to trust me? I didn't know that they didn't trust me. I'm a trustworthy guy. If there's someone in law enforcement that doesn't trust me for whatever reason, or for some guy who attributes some social media post to me, I'd be happy to speak with anyone and everyone. I spoke with Chief Diaz several times. I have a good relationship with him. So I'm not sure, many of the officers, the rank and file, not sure what the question is posed to, and it's probably as good as I could do on the response.
This last question is a similar question for both of you. To Ms. Harrison, how has being Deputy Commonwealth Attorney influenced your perspective and helped you prepare for the job of Commonwealth Attorney? And Mr. Hutchinson, how has being a defense attorney influenced your perspective and prepared you for the job of Commonwealth Attorney? So, Ms. Harrison, we'll start with you there.
Well, being the Chief Deputy Commonwealth Attorney is you're not only a prosecutor, but you're also a manager, a supervisor in the office. In our office, we have 12 attorneys total and 19 support staff. So we're one of the largest law firms in the city, much less the surrounding area. And we have over a $1.5 million budget. So I have that experience in managing other attorneys. I have that experience in managing our wide array, of staff in the office, from victim witness advocates to community advocates. Also, being the Chief Deputy Commonwealth Attorney, law enforcement, other attorneys, judges turn to you for answers to questions about the law and about cases, about what to do, about procedure and protocol, and you have to have those responses. And when you get those calls in the middle of the night, you don't have time to do legal research. You have to be able to answer it right then and there. And so having all of those experiences have allowed me to effectively do my job as a manager and administrator of the office, as well as a prosecutor.
Okay, Ms. Hutchinson?
First, I'd like to say if the Deputy Commonwealth Attorney does all those things, the job for the Commonwealth Attorney must be a breeze, because he doesn't have to do much when the deputy does everything. When the judges turn to the Deputy Commonwealth Attorney for advice, that's amazing. I believe my experience as an attorney, my experience in trying cases, my wealth of knowledge about the law, the way that I practice, the way that I run my business would help me in being a Commonwealth Attorney. I believe for this city, my intimate knowledge with the city, my love for the city, my connection with the city. My kids are here, my wife's here, my parents are here, my in-laws, my uncles, aunts, everyone. I care about what's going on in the city. It's not a job for me. It is not something where if I don't get the job, I'm going to move somewhere else, some other city, and live my life. I'm here. Hutchinsons have been here forever. We're going to be here. And I think that helps me in my perspective of what the Commonwealth Attorney's Office needs to be doing for the city.
Before we have our closing statements, Ms. Harrison, do you have a question you would like to ask Mr. Hutchinson, and Mr. Hutchinson could ask you a question?
Okay. Over the course of my career of a little over 10 years in prosecuted a multitude of different cases where the cases were tough. We didn't have direct evidence. We didn't have video surveillance or even DNA, anything like that, and you may have had a circumstantial case. But you had victims or victims' family members who came to you crying out for help, crying out for you to be a voice for them. And we tell them we are there to do the best job we can for you, to be your voice in court and to seek justice, even though we can't guarantee results. I would like to know how, as a Commonwealth Attorney, you've said on multiple occasions that you would have a 100% conviction rate, and that you would have this 100% conviction rate and maintain it by getting rid of cases that, as you say, have issues. What are you going to tell the family member of someone who was murdered or the mother of a child who was abused, where it's questionable whether you have success and can maintain that 100% conviction rate? What are you going to explain to them about how their case will not be pursued because it will interfere with your number of wins?
Which one of those do you want me to do?
What are you going to explain to a victim of crime about why you're not going to pursue their case because you can't guarantee a win for yourself?
Well, it's not guarantee a win. It's if there's no case there, there's no case there. What you don't do is you don't take 3 kids who had an allegation made against them and leave these 3 kids hanging in limbo with a rape charge for a year and then dismiss it on the day of trial, hoping that they pleaded something that they swear they didn't do. You don't put people in that position either. It's a tough thing. But if there's no evidence there, if there's not enough to go forward, that's what you have. You don't play. What I don't like about the process is if you don't have a case, you don't play the game of I'm going to charge you, and although I can't convict you, I'm going to make the charge so high and so ugly to you that you're going to plead to something lower than that, even though you're innocent and you maintain your innocence and you swear you didn't do it, and I can't prove you did it, I'm going to put you in a position where you have to make that Hobson's choice. And you have to say, do I chance being in jail for 15, 20 years, or do I cop to a plea for something that I didn't do and spend a couple years in jail? That's a tough position. I think that's dirty business. I think it's unfair, and I think that it needs to stop.
Do you have a question for Ms. Harrison?
I do not.
You do not? Okay. Well, let's go ahead with our closing statements then. I think Ms. Hutchinson went first. Ms. Harrison, it's yours.
Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum for us tonight, and thank you all for spending your evening with us. Throughout this forum, I hope I've made it clear why it is necessary to have experience as a leader in the office, the courtroom, and the community as your next Commonwealth's attorney. Because being a leader isn't just about being a boss or sitting behind a desk directing people what to do. It's about having a vision for the office, having goals for achieving that vision, and motivating and inspiring others to work alongside you to achieve that vision for the office. And here we have laid out our vision as an office that, number one, holds offenders accountable for the crimes they commit, especially when it comes to violent offenses. We take those very seriously. But also to work on those three priorities, and we work on those three priorities through our community partnerships. I'm the only one here who has experience managing an office of this size. My opponent has, I think, one other employee in his office, has never managed another attorney. I'm the only one here who has that experience in prosecution, of being that minister of justice, who is weighing out, representing the interests of the Commonwealth, the interests of the victim, and also protecting the rights of the accused. We have a very unique position. We're not here just to zealously represent one point of view, but to balance all of those things. And also as experience in the community of working in different nonprofits and different organizations and building those partnerships and relationships with other organizations to provide the best resources for our victims of crime and for rehabilitation for our offenders. So as the candidate here who has that experience, I'm ready to lead on day one. I'm ready to get to work for you, and I ask for your vote on November 7th. If you would like to learn more information about me, I will direct you to my website, which is votebethanyharrison.com. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the League for having us here tonight. I apologize for my time management at times. And I am me. I'm Carlos Hutcherson. I represent the city. I love Lynchburg. I'm invested in Lynchburg. We all want the same things. We want safe streets. We want our kids to be able to go out and play and enjoy themselves. We want our parents to not get swindled by some crook somewhere. You know, we all want the same things. And we simply have, I believe, different ways about going to get those things. Some of the things that bother me, you know, Ms. Harrison speaks about experience, and I kind of joke with her about that sometimes. But there are more experienced attorneys in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. We are to believe that Ms. Harrison counsels the more senior attorneys in her office, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Bennett, Mr. Flieger, who's been there for years. Now, because Mr. Finley has left and Ms. Harrison has been appointed deputy, now she administers and guides all these attorneys who had, several months before her promotion, had guided her. We talk about the 10 years experience as a prosecutor, the 10-10, and almost 10 is close enough to 10. And so I'm not going to mention that at all. The experience in managing the office, I believe that we can't, neither one of us have been Commonwealth attorneys. And Mike Doucette has been there a long time. No one has run for the office in a long time. 70% of the Commonwealth attorneys' races are uncontested. That's what usually happens here. Had I not chose to run, Mike Doucette would have handed it over to Ms. Harrison. That's what would have happened. And it would have been uncontested. The one problem that I have with that, and I'm going to finish my thought, and thank you, and I will stop. The one problem I have with that is Because you're in the office, you say, well, I'm going to take credit for everything that the office does. And I presume you can do that if it's simply handed off and it's one office, it never changes, nothing ever happens, it's all consistent. So Ms. Harrison can take credit for the things that Mike Doucette puts in place, can take credit for the things Chuck Finley did when he was there, can take credit for the good, also has to take credit for the bad. As a Commonwealth attorney, I would be independent. I would represent the city. I would be a beacon of hope for all those people out there that say, we need someone who recognizes us, who knows us, who has an affinity for us and loves us. That would be me. I ask you to vote for me November 7th.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have an announcement I'd like to make here before we close. The forum will be rebroadcast on the forum, LTV, Comcast Cable Channel 15, on Wednesday, October 25th at 7 p.m., Thursday, October 26th at 10 a.m., Friday, October 27th at 2 p.m., Monday, October 30th at 8 p.m. Beginning on October the 25th, the forum may also be viewed on www.lynchburgvirginia.gov/LTV, the city's website. Go to the bottom of the page, click on Special Programs. And from the League, for more election information and responses from the candidates, visit www.vote411.org. And I just want to take 1 minute to say a word to the women in our audience tonight. Don't forget that the women in this country have had the right to vote for less than 100 years. Our foremothers, the suffragettes, and the organization that founded the League of Women Voters, our foremothers worked hard to get the vote for us, okay? We need to honor them by proudly picking up that right and the responsibility that goes with it. So I want to say to the women, register, study the issues, vote responsibly and seriously. And that goes for the men too. Thank you very much to our, and Judy Lee, our president, has a closing word, and we thank you all for coming.
We thank the candidates and the audience for coming tonight and for creating together an informative, rewarding evening. Thank you, Joanna, for moderating. Stop by the tables in the hall on your way out to pick up campaign literature and league information. Note that T. Scott Garrett's representative has left copies of his statement on one of the tables. He deeply regrets that due to a prior commitment, he could not be here tonight. Natalie Short's materials are on a table as well. We wish her a speedy recovery. And as Joanna said, Google Vote 411 to read the candidates' responses to league questions. And let's everybody get out there and vote November 7th. Thank you again, and good night.